Oh, good morning. Good morning. The Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 1059 The Zone. We're streaming live on the Out of Bounds radio app. You can watch the show on YouTube. Search Out of Bounds Sports. Our guests join us on the Coors Light guest line. Coors Light, made to chill. SEC Insider Hit this morning, brought to you by Ace Bolt and Screw, powered by DeWalt Tools. 4 locations: Atlanta, Tupelo, Gluckstadt, new retail location in downtown Jackson. Ace Bolt and Screw, powered by DeWalt Tools. We want to welcome in Dane Brugler, theathletic.com, NFL Draft Insider. And, of course, Dane joins us on the Coors Light guest line. All right, Dane, I see where you are an amateur barbecue connoisseur, griller, and so on. And we talk a lot of food and booze and beverage on this show. And we have a super cool grill downstairs where we throw stuff on and so on. So what is Dane Brugler's go-to on the grill?
I think I'd have to say beef ribs. I mean, that's something where all you need is salt and pepper, and you let that beef sing. You know, you put it on the smoker for a good 5-6 hours. It's not as time-intensive as a brisket, but you're still getting some of that payoff. Beef ribs, to me, that's the go-to.
I love hearing this. This is I'm already hungry. So this guy knows. Yeah, you know, we know how to do this in the Sun Belt, Dane. I mean, you know, because of the weather, we can grill year-round, but we get after it with our pit masters and so on. So it's good to hear that you fire that bad boy up. Let's start with the NFL draft's a lot of fun to cover. You cover it year-round. We've got some pretty good prospects, but one, I think, really good prospect in Elijah Moore, wide receiver out of Ole Miss, had a great season under Lane Kiffin. Where do you have him as far as wide receivers on your board?
Yeah, and this is another really strong wide receiver class. You know, last year we set a record, I think it was 12 in the first 2 rounds, which had never happened before. This year, we might hit double digits in the first 2 rounds again. And really, it's going to push some other really good receivers to the 3rd round. And so it's another year with a crowded class of really talented guys at the top. And Elijah Moore, he's right there in that mix where I don't think he's going to be a first-round pick, but he's going to be somewhere on day 2. And it's just a matter of where does he fit from team to team based off of what he does? Because obviously drafting a receiver, you're looking for – there's different types, you know, big, long, outside receivers, undersized slot receivers, guys that can do everything. There's so many different types. And so different offenses are looking to kind of find what works best for their scheme and for what they're missing. And, Elijah Moore he's a little different because he's a little undersized. In that Ole Miss offense, you see him, routinely, most of his targets are within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, either on, bubbles or screens or slants. It's designed to get him the ball in space so we can see that athleticism, see him create. He's a high volume target touch player. And he could be a flexible chess piece for an offense who understands how to use him. So I think somewhere in that 2nd, 3rd round mix, somewhere between, say, receivers 8 and 12 off the board,
Okay.
I think somewhere in that mix.
Okay. Dane Brugler on the Out of Bounds Show and the Coors Light guest line, theathletic.com, NFL Draft Insider, talking Elijah Moore, having a great year, and we'll see where he lands, maybe in the 2nd round, possibly the 3rd, but it'd be nice to see him go in the 2nd round. Do you have a comp for Elijah Moore that's currently playing in the NFL, Dane?
Yeah, and I was working on Moore's report the other day, and I'm kind of going through seeing, okay, what makes the most sense? Maybe a little bit of Emmanuel Sanders. It reminded me a lot of Kendall Wright, coming out of Baylor, 7-8 years ago. Not as many downfield targets as Kendall Wright had with RG3 in that Baylor offense, but in terms of the type of athlete and what he does really well, I think that's where you see some similarities. And that's what makes it tough with because they really force-fed Elijah Moore the ball, and it was a lot of it was just near the line of scrimmage. And so He's a little bit more of a gadget player than a true seasoned receiver. But at the same time, you can put on some tape against, I'm thinking back against Vanderbilt, where you see a double move where he could get deep and track the football and come down with it. So I don't think he's only a gadget player. He's more than that. But it does make it a little tougher when other receivers have more downfield reps, downfield routes. They've got a more established route tree. So it does make it a little tougher with a player like Moore, who has so much production. But in terms of how he's going to be used at the next level, there's a little bit of an unproven aspect to his draft report.
But you wouldn't be surprised if he's gone in the first 15 picks of the second round?
No, because I think when you talk receivers, there's so many different types of receiver. And so if I'm a team that's looking for that slot receiver or a guy that I can motion all over the offense and use him in different ways, be that flexible chess piece, then Elijah Moore fits a lot of what I'm looking for. Now, again, he's not going to be for everybody, because some teams are looking for size on the outside or, just a different style of receiver. So it really comes down to the teams that are going to be looking for that type of receiver, where they're drafted. If he goes top 15 in the second round, great. But I think more importantly, it's about the team that drafts him and using him the correct way, and not drafting him and saying, okay, let's just, let's hit a bunch of go routes. I mean, using him based off of the strengths that he showed at the college level.
Okay. Dane Brugler, theathletic.com, NFL Draft Insider. He joins us on the Coors Light guest line. You're listening to the Out of Bounds Show. We're talking Elijah Moore, wide receiver out of Ole Miss. Can you give me a team or two that you think would be a good fit for Elijah Moore, Dane?
Yeah, I think when you look at the offenses around the league and the teams that have a needed receiver and the teams that have an offense that kind of conducive to, what Moore does, his strengths, if you just drop him in, how would that work? I think you look at a team like Seattle. They could use another weapon. You've got your size, with your DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett's an undersized guy, but he's more of a undersized receiver that wins deep. Plug in an Elijah Moore who can handle a lot of those underneath throws, those shallow crossers, and give you more of a catch after or a run after catch element. I think that would work. I think Tennessee, you got big A.J. Brown out there. You got Corey Davis. They need Adam Humphries. Good chance he's moving on. The slot receiver for the Titans. You can plug Elijah Moore in there, and I think that would make some sense. Maybe even Baltimore, who, they need more, receivers to help Lamar Jackson. I think they might want more size for Lamar. But if you're looking for a guy that fits that offense, that's Elijah Moore, because, you're going to see a lot of catch and run opportunities. So those are a few teams where I think it would make a lot of sense in that second round.
Dane Brugler on the Out of Bounds Show, NFL Draft Insider, theathletic.com. Let's stay with wide receivers. Jamar Chase doesn't play this year, opts out, but people still love him. Devonta Smith had a magnificent year. Again, different body types, different receivers. Where do you have Jamar Chase, and where do you have Devonta Smith as far as your wide receiver board?
For me personally, I do still have Jamar Chase as the top receiver, and it's so easy to just focus on what just happened and forget about the amazing season Jamar Chase had last year. But I mean, he rewrote the SEC record books with a lot of what he did. I think when you look at it, it just fits a little bit better with the size. That's going to be the biggest thing for a lot of teams. Devonta Smith, yeah, he's tough. There's no question. He's a lot stronger than he looks, but at only 170, 175 pounds, that you worry about that. After taking a few hits, is he going to get banged up? And that's something that's going to affect where they draft him. But I will say, I just came out with my mock draft yesterday, and I had Devonta Smith going 3 as the first receiver off the board. But I think the main reason for that is because the team that's drafting 3, and that's Miami. And Tua Tagovailoa, they're committed to as their quarterback. He had his struggles this year as a rookie, how are we going to surround Tua with, talent to help him take that next step in his development? Okay, well, why not reunite him with a guy he's very, very familiar with in Devonta Smith? And I think the biggest reason where Tua is struggling is he needs to figure out the difference between college open and NFL open. There's a difference there. And that NFL open, even though he saw it, he'd often check down because he's so used to seeing wide open guys at Alabama. Okay, well, you give him a Devonta Smith who can create his own space, who has those elite ball skills. I think that's going to really help his development. So even though I do have Jamar Chase as my top receiver, I would not be surprised at all if Devonta Smith is drafted ahead of him. So there's a lot of split opinion around the league about which receiver should be drafted first. Personally, I'm taking Jamar Chase, but it's hard to look at what Devonta Smith did last year and just totally say, we'll get him later because of the body type. I mean, he just a phenomenal year. Part of that was scheme. Part of that was just all the elite talent around him. But he got open at will. The ball skills are elite. There's so much to like about Devonta Smith and what he offers you at the next level.
Out of bounds, 105.9 The Zone. He is Dane Brugler with theathletic.com NFL Draft Insider. Speaking of Tua, he had an okay year. There's still a lot of question marks. We have a theory. First of all, we've got a lot of Alabama listeners because we're not but 2.5 hours away from T-Town. When you watched Tua play, first of all, how did he grade out? How high did he grade out, and what did you think about his game this year? Because we kind of believe that first-round draft picks, quarterbacks, get the overwhelming benefit of the doubt because of where they're selected in the draft. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think it's tough because they do get the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, there's a lot more pressure that comes with it. You look at Tua, there are already people saying, well, the Dolphins need to move on. They have the 3rd overall pick this year. They could draft the Justin Fields there, and you're upgrading the quarterback position. So while I do agree with you, there is an element of the benefit of the doubt. There's also the side that the amount of pressure that's on you as an early round drafted quarterback, you have to perform right away, and if you don't, then okay, maybe we need to move on. So it's definitely a fine line there. With Tua, I graded him as the 2nd quarterback in last year's draft. Joe Burrow is the clear-cut number 1, not even a conversation. And then it was Justin Herbert and Tua in that 2 and 3 spot. And with Tua, you saw so twitchy, his ability to work the entire field. He was a really smart individual. You worried about the injuries, obviously. That was the biggest thing. But also coming from that Alabama offense where Steve Sarkisian, what he did was just fantastic. He did it with Tua, and now he's doing it with Mac Jones, and he's going to get Mac Jones drafted in the 1st round. But with Tua, he's got the talent. It's just a matter of, I think the biggest thing, what I mentioned before, is discerning the difference. You have NFL open, you have college open. He knows what college open is. He saw it at Alabama, and those guys were wide open. He needs to understand that those windows in the NFL are much, much smaller, and they're there. You watch the tape; those windows are there. He's just not hitting it because he's not understanding that those are the windows he needs to hit. So I think a lot of quarterbacks, they take a big jump from their freshman year to their sophomore year in the NFL. Those first 2 seasons, I'm very eager to see what Tua looks like in year 2. Especially if they're able to get him a little bit more help around him.
All right. Real quick on Mac Jones, and then we'll get to Kylin Hill. How low is his ceiling?
Yeah, that's it. He's a high floor, low ceiling guy because he has very average physical traits. He's not the biggest. His arm is good, not great. His mobility is okay. He's not a statue, but he's also not going to get you a lot of rushing yards either. He's got a little bit of functional mobility, and so he's a really tough evaluation because everything around him is perfect. The play calling, the offensive line, the running game, the receivers, everything around him is perfect. And so we have to try and evaluate him independent of his surroundings. And that's very, very tough to do.
Sure.
But when you break it down, there are too many teams in the 1st round that could use a quarterback, especially in the back half. You look at the Colts, you look at Washington, you look at Pittsburgh, New Orleans. There are a lot of teams that could potentially use that quarterback, and some of those teams are playoff teams, and they could be in a good situation offensively where you just plug in that quarterback like a Mac Jones, and he can do enough to elevate that offense. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation with Mac Jones throughout the draft season.
He is Dane Brugler, theathletic.com NFL Draft Insider on the Coors Light guest line. Let's go with Kylin Hill, talented running back out of Mississippi State. Didn't work out his senior year. There's a little bit of a drama deal there, factor, but he's got all the tools and skills. Where do you have him on your board?
Yeah, and he's tough. Right now he's kind of in limbo. I'm not sure where to put him on the draft rankings just yet, because we have to figure out what's going on. There are some issues. Him and the new coaching staff with Mike Leach, they butted heads. And it was something that was an issue during practice before the season even started. And then after the season started, that's when it really started to bubble up. And, part of it was Kylin Hill had more receptions, more targets than he did rush attempts, almost double. And so you have to look at that and say, all right, well, that was that part of it. And okay, if I draft him on my team and I want him to use him a lot as a pass catcher, is that going to be an issue? Or, is this going to be something that is going to follow him to the next level? Because there's no question, Kylin Hill is a very talented player. Love the anger that he runs with. He's a very tough runner. The foot quickness, he can dart through holes. He's very eager to attack the defense. Sometimes that works against him. He needs to, I love his aggressiveness, but sometimes he needs to trust his vision, be a little more patient instead of just trying to go. So that run tempo needs to be, developed a little bit. And then just where's the emotional maturity? We have to figure that part out. But, then that's really going to put him under a microscope this draft season. Going to the Senior Bowl is going to be big for him. We don't know what's going to happen with the Combine. It may or may not happen. Workouts, we don't know how those are going to work. So him able to go to the Senior Bowl in Mobile coming up here in a few weeks, that's going to be a huge week for him, not just what he does on the practice field, but how he does behind the scenes in the interviews. He needs to get teams to trust him, and that will really tell us where he's going to be drafted.
Dane Brugler, NFL Draft Insider on the Out of Bounds Show. Hindsight 2020 now, as good as A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf are, right? I mean, they're phenomenal wide receivers in the NFL. And DK missed 15 games of his college career, so that was a tough deal. But, A.J. was really good throughout his 3 years. But they both slipped to the second round. Now, looking back, why did that happen? How did that happen, Dane?
That's a good question. I think with DK, it was most of it was the injury stuff, the fact that he wasn't very productive at the college level. He definitely had his flashes, but in terms of consistent production, it was like, okay, is he going to be drafted in the NFL? And it was going to be more of the same, where he'd have this amazing game, but then be injured for a couple of games or disappear. And so it was more of a consistency issue, which I don't know. I do think it is fine to have that critique, but to let him fall to the final pick in the second round, that made no sense. I thought, okay, if he falls to the late first round, all right, I understand he didn't really have that resume. So I could see that, but I still haven't received a good answer from anybody around the league why he fell as far as he did. And A.J. Brown, yeah, I think that he was a guy that should have been drafted much higher. Obviously, like you said, hindsight, it's easy to do now, but even at the time during that draft process, because he was a good route runner. He wasn't the best athlete on the field, but he wasn't unathletic. It wasn't a worry that you had. So, it's hard to find these reasons why teams would overlook him. Why a team would want N'Keal Harry over A.J. Brown, I don't know. And it's the greatest football coach that ever lived did that, and Bill Belichick. So some of these, and that goes back to the draft just being a crapshoot, and teams are looking for different things, and it really makes it really why it's an art and not a science, not just as much as I do think there's something to the analytics and the numbers. It still doesn't tell the whole story about these guys. And so it really makes it for a fascinating next few months as we talk about these players in this draft class. And then in 3 years, we'll look back and say, gosh, what were we thinking? And, we hit on some, we miss on some. It's like a batter in, for a baseball team. If you could strike out 6 times in 10 at-bats, but if you get on base 4 times, you're doing your job and you're earning $20 million a year. So
right.
it's kind of like that as drafters for teams. It's an inexact science.
Dane Brugler, theathletic.com, NFL Draft Insider on the Coors Light guest line. We'll wrap it up with this, Dane. We've got a couple of minutes here. Dak Prescott, he's had a really good career. Walk me through, now that we look back, should he have been a second-round pick, and just talk about his play the last few years with the Cowboys.
Yeah, and talking about the draft being hindsight, I mean, Dak, you look at some of the quarterbacks drafted ahead of him, with Connor Cook and Cody Kessler, and I mean, it goes on and on. And as much as I'd love to give the Cowboys credit, they passed on him numerous times. They drafted him at the end of the fourth round and got lucky. And Dak Prescott's going to be a Cowboy. I'd be shocked. I know he currently does not have a contract for next year. I would be shocked if he's playing anywhere else. I think he's going to be with the Dallas Cowboys. But when he's coming out of Mississippi State, there were, a few off-field stuff, just more of the immaturity of a young kid, not nothing like criminal or nothing you really had to worry about. I think there was that, with quarterbacks that gets weighed a little bit differently. He was it seemed like he was more of an aimer as a quarterback, as a passer, instead of a just let it loose and be naturally accurate. He tried to aim too much, and that would affect his ball placement. But he's worked at it. He's gotten better and better and better. And usually we see guys not get more accurate at the NFL level when everything's more faster. But, I mean, we're seeing it with Dak Prescott. We saw it with Josh Allen coming out of Wyoming, not being the most accurate passer. And then he goes to Buffalo and he continues to develop. So a couple quarterbacks showing that it can be done. And it's forcing evaluators just to be, be a little more, diligent with their background work. How much have they been working on it already? Have they hit their ceiling? Or, is there still room for them to grow? And what's the coaching like that they're receiving? It's quarterback's the toughest position to evaluate. And a guy like Dak Prescott is a great example of just how tough it is. But there's a lot of smart people in the NFL, and a lot of smart people did not think Dak Prescott was worth a pick in the first 3 rounds.
We'll leave it there. Dane Brugler, theathletic.com, NFL Draft Insider, Pitmaster, joined us on the Coors Light guest line. Dane, thanks so much, buddy. Appreciate it.
All right, anytime. Take care.
Dane Brugler, theathletic.com on the Out of Bounds show. Little Elijah Moore, little Kylin Hill, and Dak Prescott for you. If you missed any of that, because Dane joined us for 23 minutes, you can hit Apple Podcast and search the Out of Bounds show. Spotify, search the Out of Bounds show. And Podbean, search the Out of Bounds show. We have something new on our set today that we're super excited about. And if you spot it, you can win something cool from us. So if you're watching right now on YouTube, search Out of Bounds Sports. I think you'll see it. It's a Lane Kiffin bobblehead. And we'll be back on, 9:30 on the webcast? Yeah, search YouTube and then search Out of Bounds Sports. Hour number 2 coming up.